welcome to Bedtime English Buddies. Tonight we're excited to share the story of the Adventures of Lila and the Moonlight Garden. Prologue. The night of the whispering moon. In the quiet village of Evermeadow, where the days were filled with the chirping of crickets and the nights blanketed in starlight, there lived a 6-year-old girl named Lila. She had golden curls that bounced as she ran, big curious eyes the color of a summer sky, and an endless sense of wonder. Lila loved stories more than anything. Every evening after dinner, she would climb into her bed, her stuffed bunny, Poppy, tucked under one arm and listen to her grandmother's tales. Her favorite stories were about magical lands. "Tell me about the Moonlight Garden again," she would beg. Grandma chuckled softly, settling into her chair beside the bed. "Ah, the Moonlight Garden," she said. "It's a place of wonder, a garden that glows in the moonlight, with flowers as bright as the stars and trees that sing lullabies. It's said to be hidden somewhere on the moon, waiting for a kind and brave soul to discover it." Lila hugged Poppy tighter. "Do you think it's real, Grandma?" Grandma smiled mysteriously. "Who knows? Magic is everywhere if you know where to look. And maybe, just maybe, the Moonlight Garden will find you." That night, as Lila drifted to sleep, the moon rose high in the sky, casting its silver glow over the village. A soft breeze rustled through her open window, carrying with it the faint scent of flowers and a whisper so gentle it almost seemed part of her dreams. "Lila," the whisper said, "come and see the Moonlight Garden." She stirred but didn't wake. Not until her room began to shimmer. The moonlight seemed to gather itself into a shape, spinning and swirling until it formed a glowing staircase. Lila sat up, her eyes wide with wonder. The stairs glimmered softly, leading out through her window and up into the night sky. She looked at Poppy. "Do you think it's real?" she whispered. But Poppy, as always, stayed silent. Lila slid out of bed, her heart thumping with excitement. She wasn't sure if this was a dream or something magical, but either way, she had to find out. Barefoot and holding Poppy tightly, she took the first step onto the staircase. It felt warm, like sunlight on her toes. Each step carried her higher, past the rooftops of Evermeadow, above the fields of daisies, and into the starry sky. As she climbed, she began to see the moon up close. It wasn't a cold, rocky place, like the pictures in her books. Instead, it sparkled like a jewel, with rivers of silver light and floating islands that shimmered softly. Her heart filled with awe, as the staircase carried her all the way to the moon. When she stepped off the final stair, she gasped. She had arrived at the Moonlight Garden. Chapter 1. The Glowing Stairs. The Moonlight Garden was more beautiful than anything Lila had ever imagined. Fields of silver flowers stretched as far as she could see, their petals glowing softly like tiny lanterns. A breeze made them sway gently, and they seemed to hum a quiet melody. "Wow," Lila whispered, clutching Poppy to her chest. In the distance, a river of liquid light shimmered, its surface rippling with colors like a rainbow trapped in water. Trees with glowing leaves lined the riverbanks, their branches stretching toward the sky. Every time the wind rustled their leaves, they made a soft tinkling sound, like the chime of tiny bells. Lila wandered further, her bare feet sinking into the soft mossy ground. She reached down to touch one of the flowers. Its petals were warm under her fingers, and it seemed to pulse gently, like a tiny heartbeat. "This is incredible," she said, laughing softly. Grandma was right. The Moonlight Garden is real. As she explored, the sound of laughter caught her attention. It wasn't the mischievous laughter of children, but a light musical giggle that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Who's there?" Lila called, turning in circles. A tiny figure appeared, flitting out from behind a tree. It was no taller than a teacup, with glowing petals for hair, wings that sparkled like morning dew, and eyes that shone as brightly as stars. "Hello," the creature said, twirling in the air. "I'm Lumi, and I've been waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" Lila asked, her eyes wide. Lumi nodded, doing a little flip in the air. "Oh yes, you're the one who can help us. The Moonlight Garden is in trouble, and we need someone kind and brave to save it." Lila felt her cheeks grow warm. "Me? But I'm only 6. "That doesn't matter," Lumi said. "Kindness and bravery come in all sizes. Will you help us?" Lila hesitated, looking around at the beautiful garden. She didn't know what kind of trouble Lumi meant, but the idea of helping made her feel important and special. "Yes," she said finally. "I'll help. What do I need to do?" Lumi clapped her tiny hands, creating a shower of sparkles. "You're wonderful. Come with me. I'll explain everything." Lumi led Lila through the garden, pointing out its wonders as they went. There were ponds filled with glowing fish, trees that whispered secrets when you leaned close, and bushes that sprouted stars instead of berries. As they reached the heart of the garden, Lumi grew serious. "This is the glow tree," she said, gesturing to an enormous tree with branches that stretched high into the starry sky. Its trunk shimmered like silver, and its leaves glowed softly. But something was wrong. Some of the leaves were dull, their glow fading. The branches drooped, and the air around the tree felt heavy and sad. "What's happening to it?" Lila asked, her heart sinking. "The glow tree keeps the moon bright," Lumi explained. "Its light feeds the flowers, the rivers and the stars. But the moon dust that nourishes it has been stolen." "Stolen?" "Yes," Lumi said, her wings drooping. "The shadow sprites took it. They live in the dark crater, and love playing tricks. We've tried to get it back, but they're too clever for us. That's why we need you." Lila swallowed hard. The thought of facing shadow sprites sounded scary, but she couldn't let the glow tree wither. "I'll do it," she said firmly. "I'll get the moon dust back." Lumi's face lit up with joy. "Oh, thank you, Lila. You're a true hero. But be careful. The shadow sprites are tricky. You'll need all your courage to outsmart them." Lumi handed Lila a lantern made of moonbeams. "This will light your way," she said. "And remember, you're not alone. The garden believes in you." Lila took a deep breath, holding the lantern in one hand and Poppy in the other. She didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but she was ready to find out. "Let's save the Moonlight Garden," she said, stepping into the glowing path that led toward the dark crater. Chapter 2. Meeting Lumi. The glow of the lantern flickered gently as Lila followed Lumi deeper into the Moonlight Garden. Despite the warmth of the garden's silver flowers and softly tinkling trees, a nervous flutter danced in her chest. She clutched Poppy tightly. "So, what exactly are the shadow sprites like?" Lila asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Lumi spun in the air, her tiny wings leaving trails of sparkles. "Oh, they're full of mischief, but not bad-hearted. They love riddles and games. The problem is, they don't understand how important the moon dust is to the glow tree. Can't we just ask them nicely?" Lumi sighed, her glowing petals drooping slightly. "We've tried, but they're very stubborn. And they love hiding things. It's like a game to them. That's why you'll need to outsmart them." Lila nodded, feeling a little braver. If it was just a matter of being clever, maybe she could manage it. As they walked, Lumi began explaining the Moonlight Garden's magic. "Everything here is connected to the glow tree," she said. "The flowers, the rivers, even the stars in the sky. If the glow tree fades completely, the whole garden will go dark. And if the moon goes dark, the earth will lose its nighttime magic too." "What's nighttime magic?" Lila asked. Lumi's eyes sparkled as she twirled in the air. "It's what makes dreams so vivid, what gives fireflies their glow, and what lets the stars shine brightly. Without it, the night would just be empty." Lila thought about her favorite part of bedtime, listening to her grandmother's stories while the moonlight streamed through her window. The idea of losing that magic made her determined to help. "Don't worry," she said confidently. "We'll get the moon dust back." Lumi beamed at her. "I knew you'd be the right person for this." As they continued their journey, Lumi pointed out more wonders of the garden. They passed a cluster of flowers that glowed in different colors, forming a rainbow-like patch. "These are dream blooms," Lumi explained. "They bloom when someone in the world has a beautiful dream." Lila stopped to admire a particularly bright pink flower. "What about nightmares?" "Oh, nightmares don't come here," Lumi said with a wink. "The Moonlight Garden is a place of light and happiness." Lila felt a little lighter at those words. She bent down to touch one of the flowers, and it glowed brighter under her fingertips, as if it were saying hello. Soon they reached the edge of the garden. The warm glow began to dim, and the air grew colder. Ahead of them stretched a path lined with dark, jagged rocks. The silver moss that had cushioned their steps disappeared, replaced by rough, uneven ground. "This is the start of the path to the dark crater," Lumi said, her voice quieter now. "It's a tricky journey, but I'll guide you." Lila nodded, holding the lantern tightly. She glanced back at the garden, its shimmering beauty now behind her. "I'll be brave," she whispered, more to herself than to Lumi. "Good," Lumi said, fluttering closer to her shoulder. "You've already shown so much bravery by agreeing to help. Just keep going, no matter what challenges you face." With those words, they stepped onto the path, leaving the comforting glow of the Moonlight Garden behind. Chapter 3. The Path to the Dark Crater. The path to the dark crater was filled with wonders and challenges, each more surprising than the last. The first obstacle they encountered was the Forest of Echoes. The entrance to the forest was marked by towering trees with bark as black as midnight. As Lila and Lumi stepped into the forest, the air grew still and heavy, every sound they made, Lila's footsteps, Lumi's fluttering wings, even the faint rustle of Poppy's fur, echoed endlessly, bouncing off the unseen walls of the forest. "Lila," whispered her own voice from a dozen directions. She froze, clutching Poppy tightly. "Lumi, what's happening?" "It's the forest," Lumi said, her glow dimming slightly. "It amplifies every sound, making it hard to think. Stay calm and follow me." But staying calm was easier said than done. "Lumi." As they moved deeper into the forest, the echoes grew louder, overlapping until they sounded like a crowd of people all speaking at once. Lila covered her ears, but the noise still seemed to creep into her head. "Lila! Lila! Lila!" The voices swirled around her, pulling at her courage. She stopped in her tracks, tears pricking her eyes. "Lila! You have to focus." Lumi's voice cut through the chaos like a ray of light. "Find something steady. A song, a rhythm. Anything to help you ignore the echoes." A song, Lila thought desperately. Her grandmother often sang lullabies to her before bed. She took a deep breath, trying to remember the melody. "Hush-a-bye, don't you cry," she sang softly, her voice shaky at first. But as she sang, the echoes began to fade, their volume decreasing with each line of the lullaby. By the time she finished the second verse, the forest was quiet. "You did it," Lumi cheered, twirling in delight. Lila smiled, her confidence returning. "I guess the forest doesn't like lullabies." As they exited the Forest of Echoes, they came upon the next challenge, the Bridge of Clouds. The bridge was a narrow path of glowing clouds that stretched over a river of light far below. The clouds shimmered, but they also shifted and swayed with every step. Lila hesitated at the edge, her stomach twisting. "Don't look down," Lumi advised, hovering beside her. "Focus on the path ahead." Lila gripped the lantern tightly and stepped onto the first cloud. It felt soft under her feet, like walking on a pillow. But as she took another step, the cloud wobbled, and she had to spread her arms to keep her balance. "You're doing great," Lumi encouraged. Halfway across the bridge, a gust of wind blew past, making the clouds ripple. Lila's heart raced as she wobbled, nearly losing her footing. She squeezed her eyes shut, taking deep breaths. "You're brave," she whispered to herself. "You can do this." Slowly but surely, she made it to the other side, her legs shaking but her heart swelling with pride. "You're amazing," Lumi said as they continued down the path. After crossing the bridge, they entered the Starflower Meadow. The meadow was breathtaking, a vast field of flowers that glowed like stars. With each step Lila took, the flowers bloomed brighter, lighting the way forward. "Wow," Lila whispered, enchanted by the beauty around her. But as they walked through the meadow, Lumi grew quiet. The air grew colder, and the path ahead darkened. The dark crater was near. "Are you ready?" Lumi asked, her tiny face serious. Lila tightened her grip on Poppy and nodded. "I'm ready." Together they stepped into the shadows, ready to face the mischievous shadow sprites and retrieve the stolen moon dust. Chapter 4. The mischief of the shadow sprites. The path into the dark crater was nothing like the glowing beauty of the Moonlight Garden. The air here felt cooler, heavier, and strangely quiet. The ground beneath Lila's feet was no longer soft moss or shimmering clouds, but hard dark stone that seemed to absorb the faint light of her lantern. "Stay close to me," Lumi whispered, her glow dimmed to a faint flicker. "The shadow sprites will know we're here soon. They love visitors, especially ones they can trick." Lila's grip tightened on her lantern and Poppy. "I'm not afraid," she said, more to reassure herself than Lumi. As they ventured deeper, the shadows around them seemed to move. Shapes flickered at the edges of her vision, little figures darting behind rocks and peeking out from the darkness. Their laughter echoed softly, like the tinkling of wind chimes, but with a mischievous edge. "Look," Lumi pointed ahead. Lila squinted and saw what looked like a small campfire, though its flames were dark purple and cast eerie shadows on the rocky walls. As they got closer, she could make out a group of tiny impish figures sitting around the fire. The shadow sprites were unlike anything Lila had ever seen. Each one was no taller than Lumi, with slender wispy bodies that seemed to blend into the darkness. Their eyes, however, glowed brightly, some green, some blue, some golden. They had wide grins and little horns on their heads, and their hands and feet were tipped with long, delicate claws that scratched idly at the ground. "Visitors," one of them exclaimed, hopping to its feet. Its golden eyes sparkled with excitement. "Oh, how delightful!" The others turned, their faces lighting up with wicked grins. "Visitors, visitors," they chorused, their voices overlapping. "Hello," Lila said cautiously, clutching Poppy tightly. The sprite with golden eyes stepped forward, tilting its head. "And what brings a little human and her glowing friend to our crater?" "We're here for the moon dust," Lumi said boldly, flying up to face them. "You took it from the glow tree, and we need it back." The sprites gasped theatrically, covering their mouths with their hands. "The moon dust? Oh no, how scandalous." "But we didn't take it," another sprite said, grinning slyly. "Did we?" asked a third, scratching its head. The golden-eyed sprite smirked. "Maybe we borrowed it." Lila stepped forward, her voice firm despite her racing heart. "The glow tree is dying without it. If you don't give it back, the whole Moonlight Garden will fade, and the moon will go dark." The sprites exchanged exaggerated looks of shock and dismay. Then they burst into laughter, their giggles echoing around the crater. "Go dark? Oh, how dramatic," one sprite said, wiping a tear of laughter from its eye. "But we like the dark," said another, somersaulting in the air. "It's cozy." Lila frowned. "It's not cozy for everyone. Please, you have to give it back." The golden-eyed sprite twirled in the air, its grin widening. "We might, if you play our game." Lumi groaned. "I knew it. Shadow sprites always want to play games." The sprites clapped and cheered. "Games, games, games. What kind of game?" Lila asked cautiously. The golden-eyed sprite hovered closer, its voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A game of riddles. If you answer our riddles correctly, we'll give you back the moon dust. But if you get them wrong, what happens if we get them wrong?" Lila asked, her heart pounding. The sprite's grin grew wider. "You'll have to stay and play with us forever." Lila glanced at Lumi, who looked worried but gave her a small nod. "I believe in you," Lumi whispered. Lila took a deep breath. "Okay, I'll play." The sprites cheered and formed a circle around her, their eyes glowing brightly in the dim light. The golden-eyed sprite floated in the center, clapping its hands. "Here's the first riddle," it said, its voice playful but sharp. "I'm not alive, but I can grow. I don't have lungs, but I need air to survive. What am I?" Lila frowned, thinking hard. She repeated the riddle in her head, focusing on the clues. "Not alive but can grow. Doesn't have lungs but needs air. Fire," she said suddenly. "The answer is fire." The sprites clapped, their grins widening. "Very good. Very clever. But that was only the first," said another sprite, rubbing its hands together. "Here's the second. I have keys but no locks. I have space but no room. You can enter but you can't go outside. What am I?" Lila bit her lip, her mind racing. Keys but no locks. Space but no room. Enter but not outside. "A keyboard," she exclaimed, remembering the old piano in her grandmother's house. The sprites clapped again, but their smiles were starting to fade. She's too smart, one of them whispered. Not fair, muttered another. The golden-eyed sprite frowned but nodded. Fine, one more riddle. If you solve this one, you win the game. It hovered closer, its voice dropping to a menacing whisper. The more you take, the more you leave behind. What am I? Lila's brow furrowed. This one was harder. The more you take, the more you leave behind. What could that mean? She paced back and forth, clutching Poppy tightly. Then, as she glanced at the ground, the answer came to her like a flash of light. Footsteps, she shouted. The answer is footsteps. The sprites groaned, collapsing dramatically onto the ground. She won. No fair. We wanted to keep her. The golden-eyed sprite sighed, then snapped its fingers. A small pouch appeared in its hands, glowing faintly. Fine. You win, little human. Here's your precious moon dust. It tossed the pouch to Lila, who caught it carefully. Thank you, she said, though her voice was firm. And maybe next time, you shouldn't take things that don't belong to you. The sprites huffed and pouted but said nothing as Lila and Lumi turned to leave. Come back and play again sometime. One called after her. Not likely, Lumi muttered under her breath. Lila smiled as they left the crater, the pouch of moon dust safe in her hands. She had done it. She had outsmarted the shadow sprites. But there was still one more task ahead. Returning the moon dust to the glow tree. Chapter 5. The glow tree restored, Lila felt a wave of relief wash over her as the eerie darkness of the dark crater gave way to the softer light of the Moonlight Garden. The path back felt brighter, as though the garden itself could sense the return of the moon dust. Lumi flitted beside her, her glow now radiant with excitement. You did it, Lila. Lumi chirped. The glow tree is going to be so happy, and so will the moon. Lila smiled but kept her grip firm on the small pouch in her hands. We're not done yet. I just hope the glow tree isn't too weak. As they approached the heart of the Moonlight Garden, Lila noticed how much dimmer everything looked compared to when she first arrived. The glowing flowers drooped, their silver petals pale. The tinkling sound of the breeze through the trees was quieter now, as though the garden itself was holding its breath. The glow tree stood at the center of it all, its once vibrant branches now dull and brittle. Its roots were tangled and cracked, and the faint glow around it was barely visible. Oh no, Lumi whispered, her tiny hands flying to her mouth. We have to hurry. Lila nodded and stepped closer to the tree. The pouch of moondust in her hands felt warm, almost alive. She could sense its magic, a steady pulse like a heartbeat. What do I do? She asked Lumi, who hovered anxiously beside her. Sprinkle the moondust into the heart of the tree, Lumi said, pointing to a small hollow at the base of the trunk. That's where its magic flows strongest. Lila knelt down, carefully opening the pouch. Inside, the moondust shimmered like liquid starlight, tiny specks that seemed to dance and twinkle as they caught the light. She hesitated for a moment, marveling at its beauty, before gently tipping the pouch and letting the dust pour into the hollow. As soon as the first grains of moondust touched the tree, a soft hum filled the air. The glow tree shivered, its branches rustling as though waking from a long sleep. The dull bark began to shimmer, and a faint silver light crept up the trunk. It's working, Lumi cried, spinning in excitement. Lila poured the rest of the moondust into the hollow, watching in awe as the tree transformed. Its branches glowed brighter and brighter, the silver light spreading like water until the entire tree radiated with a warm ethereal glow. The brittle roots repaired themselves, sinking deeply into the earth. Then, with a sound like the softest sigh, the glow tree burst into bloom. Silver blossoms unfurled all at once, filling the air with a soft, magical fragrance. The light from the flowers was so bright that it seemed to chase away the shadows, illuminating the entire garden. It's beautiful, Lila whispered, her heart swelling with pride and wonder. The glow tree's magic spread outward, bringing the Moonlight Garden back to life. The flowers along the path stood tall again, their silver petals gleaming. The dream blooms glowed with renewed colors, and the tinkling trees swayed gently, their music filling the air once more. Above them, the moon itself seemed to glow brighter, its light reflecting off the restored garden. Lila, Lumi said, her voice full of emotion, you've saved the glow tree. You've saved everything. Lila smiled, but before she could respond, a deep, warm voice filled the air. Thank you, little one. Lila looked around startled. Who said that? It's the glow tree, Lumi whispered, her hands clasped in awe. The tree's light pulsed gently, and the voice spoke again. For centuries, I have stood as the heart of the Moonlight Garden, but never have I seen such courage and kindness in one so young. You have brought me back from the brink, and for that I am forever grateful. Lila's cheeks turned pink. It wasn't just me. Lumi helped a lot too. The glow tree chuckled, a sound like the rustling of leaves. Indeed, but it was your determination and bravery that made this possible. Suddenly, the glow tree's light shifted, and one of its silver blossoms floated down toward Lila. She caught it in her hands, its petals soft and warm. This is a gift, the glow tree said, a blossom of everlight. Its glow will guide you in the darkest times, and remind you of the light you carry within. Lila stared at the glowing flower in her hands, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you, she said softly. Lumi twirled in the air, her joy infectious. The garden is safe, and the moon will shine brightly again. Oh, what a wonderful day. The garden seemed to agree, its light brighter than ever. Lila looked around, taking in the beauty of the Moonlight Garden one last time. It's time to go home, isn't it? She asked, glancing at Lumi. Lumi nodded, though her smile was tinged with sadness. Yes, the glow tree's magic will guide you back to your world. But don't worry, you'll always be a part of the Moonlight Garden now. Lila smiled, holding the blossom of everlight close. I'll never forget this place. Or you, Lumi. Lumi flew close, her tiny hands reaching out to touch Lila's cheek. As the glow tree's light swirled around her, Lila felt a warmth that wasn't just magic and soft. Wasn't Martin that place? Wasn't just magic. It was the feeling of belonging, of having made a difference. The next thing she knew, she was back in her bed, the blossom of everlight still glowing softly in her hands. Chapter 6. The Song of the Moonlit River. As Lila and Lumi made their way back through the Moonlight Garden, they heard a faint melody in the distance, a song so beautiful it seemed to pull at Lila's very soul. The tune was soft and haunting, like a lullaby sung by the stars themselves. What's that? Lila asked, pausing to listen. That's the Moonlit River, Lumi said, her glow dimming slightly. It's beautiful, but it's also dangerous. The spirits who guard it aren't always friendly, curious but cautious. Lila followed the sound. They soon came upon a river unlike any she'd seen before. Its waters shimmered with silver light, flowing gently under a bridge made of starlight. Along its banks, small willows with glowing leaves swayed to the rhythm of the song. As Lila approached the water's edge, 3 ethereal figures rose from the river. They looked like women made of moonlight, their forms fluid and ever-shifting. Welcome, traveler, one of the river spirits said, her voice as melodic as the song itself. You've done a great service for the Moonlight Garden, but before you pass, we must see if your heart is as pure as your actions. What do you mean? Lila asked, clutching the blossom of everlight. We will ask you 3 questions. Another spirit said. Answer truthfully, and you may cross. Deceive us, and the river will never let you go. Lila nodded, her heart pounding. I'll answer honestly. The first spirit stepped forward, her glowing form shimmering. You've shown great courage tonight, but tell us, was there ever a moment when you thought of turning back? Lila hesitated. Yes, she admitted. When I faced the shadow sprites I was scared. I wanted to run, but I didn't, because I knew the glow tree needed me. The spirit smiled, pleased with her honesty. The second spirit approached. If the blossom of everlight could only save one thing, the Moonlight Garden or your world, which would you choose? Lila's chest tightened. That's a hard question, she said softly. I don't think I could choose. But if I had to, I'd choose the Moonlight Garden. My world would survive without magic, but this place wouldn't. The spirits exchanged approving glances. The third spirit came forward. What will you do with the magic you now carry? Lila thought carefully. I'll use it to bring light to dark places, not just with the blossom, but with the things I've learned. Kindness, bravery and hope. The spirits smiled and parted, their song growing louder as the bridge of starlight solidified. You may cross, they said in unison. Lila stepped onto the bridge, feeling a new sense of confidence in her heart. Chapter 7. The Starlit Sky Maze. On the other side of the river lay the entrance to a maze unlike anything Lila had ever seen. Its walls were made of shimmering stars, constantly shifting and rearranging themselves. The starlit sky maze, Lumi whispered. It's said to test the strength of your spirit. Only those who truly believe in themselves can make it through. Lila hesitated. She wasn't sure she believed in herself, at least not completely, but she had come this far, and she wasn't about to give up now. As she stepped into the maze, the stars around her began to glow brighter, reflecting her emotions. When she felt confident, the path seemed clearer, but when doubt crept in, the stars dimmed, and the walls closed in. Trust yourself, Lila, Lumi encouraged, flying ahead to scout the path. With each turn, Lila faced memories of her past times. She had failed, moments when she had been afraid to try. The maze seemed to feed on her insecurities, whispering doubts in her ear. But then she thought of the blossom of Everlight, of the glow tree and Lumi, and all she had accomplished. Slowly, she began to push back the doubts. I can do this, she said aloud. The stars around her flared brightly, and the maze opened up. With newfound determination, she made her way to the center, where a single brilliant star awaited her. You found the light within, the star said, its voice gentle and warm. Now take it with you. The star floated down and touched her heart, filling her with a warmth she'd never felt before. Chapter 8. The Forgotten Guardian. Just as Lila thought her journey was nearly complete, the ground trembled, and a massive creature emerged from the earth. It was the Forgotten Guardian, a giant being made of stone and moonlight. Who dares carry the blossom of Everlight? The Guardian roared. I do, Lila said, stepping forward. The glow tree gave it to me. The Guardian's glowing eyes narrowed. The blossom is not a gift for the unworthy. Prove to me that you are its rightful keeper. The Guardian raised its massive hands, creating a storm of challenges. First it summoned shadowy figures for Lila to face. She stood firm, using the light of the blossom to dispel them. Next, it tested her mind with riddles more difficult than the shadow sprites. Lila answered each one carefully, drawing on everything she had learned. Finally, the Guardian looked into her heart, searching for any trace of selfishness or fear. Finding none, it knelt before her. You are worthy, it said. Carry the blossom with pride, young one. Chapter 9. The Shadow Sprite's Revenge. As Lila neared the exit of the Moonlight Garden, the mischievous shadow sprites returned. Angry at their defeat, they tried to steal the blossom of Everlight. You don't deserve it, one sprite hissed. We'll take it back, another said, lunging at her. But Lila had grown stronger. She stood tall and used the light of the blossom to outsmart and outmaneuver them, reminding them of her earlier victory. Go back to your shadows, she said firmly. Defeated once more, the sprites retreated, grumbling as they disappeared into the darkness. Chapter 10. The Moonlight Coronation. At last Lila returned to the glow tree, where the Moonlight Garden was gathered to celebrate her bravery. The glow tree crowned her an honorary guardian of the garden, placing a silver circlet on her head. You are forever a part of our world, the glow tree said, and its light will always be with you. Lila felt a surge of pride as the garden erupted in cheers. Expanded epilogue. A spark in the real world. Back in her world, Lila found that the blossom of Everlight continued to glow, but it also began to spark small bits of magic in her everyday life. Flowers in her garden grew brighter, people around her seemed kinder, and her own courage shone in everything she did. She knew she would return to the Moonlight Garden someday, but until then, she carried its light within her, ready to face any challenge with bravery, kindness and hope. The end.